You'd think, after working 60-hour weeks to finally afford a place with trees, that the sound of rustling leaves would be relaxing, peaceful even. But in Pine Hollow Estates, peace comes at a price, and apparently, leaves can get you fined like you're running a criminal operation. The notice came on a Tuesday. It was neon orange, slapped onto my front door like a brand of shame. Violation #47, leaf accumulation, improper debris distribution. Fine $10.00. I stood there, coffee still in hand, trying to understand what universe I had stepped into. Surely this was a typo, a mistake, some HOA intern gone rogue. But no, the official citation included photos zoomed-in shots of maple leaves scattered across my lawn, and a clause I had never seen before in the homeowner's manual: all leaves must be cleared and evenly managed within 12 hours of falling. Excess accumulation, especially windswept clustering on adjacent properties, constitutes a breach under Section 12.4. What the hell is windswept clustering? I stared at the photos in disbelief. Most of those leaves had come from the trees on the community greenway, not even my yard. I looked up, and sure enough, the same leaves still danced above me, a gentle October breeze carrying them to wherever the wind pleased. And then I saw her, Karen Whitmore, president of the HOA, general of the lawn wars, tyrant of the suburbs. She stood across the street in her pressed khaki suit, arms folded, holding a clipboard like a scepter of power. She saw me reading the notice, smiled, and waved. The next morning, I attended the HOA office in person. The building looked like a dentist's waiting room, painted in grays and taupe, designed to rob you of the will to argue. I asked to speak to someone about the violation. "Is this about the leaves?" the receptionist said without looking up. "You're number 7 this week." I was ushered into a small office where Karen sat, serene, as if fining people for existing brought her joy. "Mr. Miles," she said smoothly, "we've had several complaints. The leaves from your property have been well colonizing your neighbors' yards. As you know, that creates visual inconsistency. We must protect our community's aesthetic. They're leaves," I said flatly, "from public trees, but they crossed your boundary," she replied, tapping her nails against her clipboard. "And you failed to manage their placement. It's your responsibility. You fined me $10,000 for leaves. Yes, consistency fines begin at $5. And double if there's no mitigation within 24 hours. I felt like I was losing oxygen. How are people supposed to prevent the wind from blowing? Karen smiled like a shark smelling blood. Most residents use Proactive Services premium landscaping, ground nets, automated blowers. We offer HOA-approved vendors if cost is a concern. Right. The approved vendors, the same 5 companies owned by Karen's cousin. I walked out of that office with fire boiling in my chest. And that's when the idea started forming. If they wanted to wage war over leaves, then I would give them a storm. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat at my dining table, HOA citation in one hand, a glass of bourbon in the other, staring out at the lawn like it was a battlefield. It was just leaves, brown, gold, and red like autumn confetti. But to Karen Whitmore, they might as well have been a personal insult or an act of war. I reread the violation a dozen times. $10,000 for something nature did without permission. A debris distribution imbalance. I'd never heard a phrase so absurd and so infuriating in the same breath. Then I did what I do when I'm pushed to the brink. I made a plan, a big one, a petty one, a beautiful, vengeful, strategic one. And it started with a phone call. "Hi," I said to the rental office of Guston Company, the largest landscaping equipment provider in the state. "What's the most powerful commercial-grade leaf blower you have?" The man on the other end laughed. "Sir, we have several industrial-level blowers. What's the scale of your project?" "I'm going to need about 300 of them." Silence. "Come again. I want 300 backpack leaf blowers delivered. Top of the line. I'll also need operators, people who can run them all day, in synchronized patterns. Is this for a parade?" I smiled darkly. "No, it's for justice, the gathering." I wasn't content with hiring just anyone. This had to be orchestrated, not chaotic. I didn't want to look like a lunatic with noise machines. I wanted this to be a message. One Karen could not ignore, one she could feel in her bones. So I started recruiting. On Tuesday, I put up a flyer at the local mechanic shop, looking for operators. $200 day, must enjoy leaf blowing, snacks provided, no HOA affiliation preferred. By Friday, I had 114 signups: retired veterans, students, off-duty firefighters, one former cheerleading coach who brought her own whistle and insisted on leading formation drills. Then I added more from Craigslist, a gig work app, and a post in the city's Reddit. Total count, 312 leaf blowers. We scheduled for the following weekend: forecast clear skies, light wind, and Karen's weekly garden party at noon. Perfect. I called it Operation Leaf Storm. Tactical prep by Saturday morning. My yard looked like a military staging zone. Blowers lined up in rows like a militia of air-based defiance. My garage was filled with fuel canisters and protein bars. I wore a vest, because why not, and used walkie-talkies to coordinate the sectors. At 9:00 a.m., the team assembled. People of every background stood in my driveway, holding equipment, sipping coffee, ready for chaos. I addressed them like a general before a righteous war. Today, I said, we fight pettiness with purpose. We take nature's wrath and turn it into a message. We don't vandalize. We don't cross any legal lines, but we let them know you don't mess with common sense. And you sure as hell don't fine people 10 grand for the direction of the wind. Cheers erupted. We distributed zones: north yard, south sidewalk, perimeter sweep, and most importantly, the barrage front. At 10:00 a.m., the blowers roared to life like jet engines. The leafquake, imagine 300 leaf blowers turned on in unison. Now imagine them forming waves of synchronized movement, blowing every loose leaf, pine needle, and bit of mulch into the sky. Neatly, repeatedly, toward the HOA building, toward Karen's house, toward every carefully pruned lawn that had never tasted a challenge before. It was glorious. Neighbors peeked from behind blinds. Some filmed, some clapped. A few of Karen's loyalists emerged from their homes, shaking fists and shouting over the hurricane of noise. But we had permits. Every operator had safety gear. Every machine had rental papers. And I had the receipts. Karen appeared at her porch at 11:03 a.m., mouth agape, her usually flawless bun bouncing in the artificial windstorm. I waved from across the street. "Morning," I shouted. She tried to yell something back, but her voice was swallowed by the wall of wind. By noon, her white lawn chairs were buried in a sea of perfectly clean, legally sourced neighborhood leaves. My team swept in formation, respectful of driveways, never touching vehicles or private windows, just applying gentle, consistent pressure. A calculated leaf siege. Damage control by 1:00 p.m. HOA board members began arriving. Some tried to negotiate. One shouted over the comms, "This is harassment." "No, ma'am," I replied. "This is awareness." I handed her a printed copy of Section 12.4 and our HOA's own vague wording on leaf management. She didn't speak again. The operation continued until 5:00 p.m. when we ceased all activity, bagged every leaf in biodegradable sacks, and left the neighborhood cleaner than it had ever been. And then we packed up, quietly, orderly, professionally. Karen watched the whole thing from her window, silent. I had broken no laws. Not a single HOA rule had been violated, but the message had landed, loud and very, very clear. The morning after Operation Leaf Storm was disturbingly quiet. No leaf blowers, no complaints, no Karen on patrol. The air smelled like damp earth and gasoline. And for the first time in months, my lawn was immaculate, but peace was never going to last. By 7:45 a.m., the first email arrived. Subject: HOA fine notification. Unapproved assembly amount due $3. Violation. Unauthorized group activity. Noise disturbance. Excessive landscaping discharge. Note: further violations may result in HOA legal escalation. I laughed out loud. This time, they weren't even pretending. Excessive landscaping discharge. That sounded more like a medical condition than a citation. But it wasn't just the email. By noon, I received 2 more. One for soil disruption, another for non-HOA sanctioned uniformity breach. That last one, My neighbor had trimmed his hedges to match mine. Apparently, synchronizing your yard with someone else's is now a finable offense. I knew Karen wouldn't take the leaf blitz sitting down. I just didn't expect her retaliation to be so desperate. But then came the bigger blow. The emergency hearing a manila envelope appeared on my porch that evening. Inside was a formal HOA summons. Karen had scheduled an emergency disciplinary hearing at the clubhouse. She accused me of inciting civil disruption, deliberate undermining of HOA governance, and, I quote, weaponizing wind instruments. It was laughable, absurd, and yet somehow real. I wasn't the only target. Within 2 days, 9 other households involved in Operation Leaf Storm received fines, warnings, and hearing summons. Karen was trying to make an example out of all of us. She thought if she scared us enough, we'd fold. But she had underestimated something important. We were done being quiet. The Whisper Network that week. Something began to shift in Pine Hollow. Neighbors who had once waved politely and disappeared into their garages now lingered on sidewalks. We talked. We compared fines. We realized how many of us had been targeted unfairly, some for leaving porch lights on too late, others for letting dogs bark past quiet hours. One woman, an elderly widow named Mrs. Harmon, showed me a stack of 27 fines she'd received since January. Her offense, feeding stray cats. My husband planted those rose bushes, she told me, voice trembling. Now she says they're not the correct color temperature. Karen had been quietly choking the neighborhood with rules no one voted for, weaponizing the bylaws to create a kingdom of fear. But fear has a limit, and we were past it. Behind the curtains, my friend Ravi, an accountant who lived 2 doors down, offered to take a closer look at the HOA's budget report, which, thanks to some recent transparency laws, had to be made available upon request. The documents he received were interesting, very interesting. For starters, $40. Labeled as community aesthetic enhancement, was paid to a landscaping company owned by Karen's nephew. Another $12. Was logged under outdoor ambiance management, which turned out to be Christmas lights she had strung exclusively on her street. And most shocking, $18. $750 for legal compliance advisement went to a consultancy that didn't exist in the business registry. Karen had created a financial black hole and fed it HOA dues like a sacrificial offering. The gathering storm, we didn't go to the emergency hearing alone. We brought 33 homeowners. That might not sound like much until you remember the HOA had only 60 voting members total. We represented a majority, and we were ready. Karen greeted us at the community center doors like a queen welcoming peasants to a trial. She wore a red power suit, flanked by 2 board members and the HOA lawyer, a wiry man with a weak handshake and an expensive watch. Only the cited residents may speak, she said coolly. Spectators must remain silent. No problem, I said, handing her a sheet of paper. What's this? She snapped. Petition. Motion of no confidence. Signed by 32 voting members. We're calling for a full HOA leadership vote at the next scheduled board meeting, as per section 9.7 of the bylaws. She froze. The room went quiet. Even her lawyer blinked twice. You can't just... I can, I said. And I did. Fractures and fallout, she moved forward with the hearing anyway. But the damage was done. One by one. Residents stood and spoke not in my defense, but in their own voices. Mrs. Harmon, Ravi, the parents of a disabled child fined for installing a wheelchair ramp without pre-approved aesthetics. The hearing unraveled. Karen shouted over them. She pounded her gavel. She accused us of collusion, defamation, conspiracy. She threw around threats like rice at a wedding. But no one backed down. The room had changed. We weren't neighbors anymore. We were a movement. Karen's counterpunch that night, as I sat on my porch under the stars, sipping a well-earned beer. A black SUV crept past my house. It circled once, then again, and again. I saw the driver's silhouette. It wasn't Karen. It was her lawyer. The next morning, I received a letter official, notarized, cease and desist. It accused me of slander, emotional distress, and interference with contractual agreements. But Karen had made a mistake. She'd taken the fight out of bylaws and into the courts, and I had something she didn't. receipts, and an entire neighborhood behind me. When someone with too much power starts losing control, they don't surrender quietly, they thrash. And Karen Matthews. She was in full thrash mode. The cease and desist letter was just the appetizer. Within 48 hours, she'd filed 3 formal complaints against me. Defamation of character, instigating discord among HOA members, creating a hostile residential environment. It would have been funny if it weren't so disturbingly manipulative. But Karen wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to scare me into silence. Too bad she forgot the first rule of warfare. Never bring a paper sword to a neighborhood rebellion. Cracks in the castle. The morning after receiving her legal threats, I stopped by Ravi's. He greeted me with 2 things, a thick folder, a smile that said, "We've got her. Take a look at this," he said, flipping through the contents. That landscaping company the HOA paid, it's listed to a PO box, and it doesn't have a tax ID, fake business, fake everything. But that wasn't all. Ravi had traced 3 separate vendor payments, totaling over $60.00 so to Karen's brother-in-law, a shell LLC, and an address that no longer existed. "She's laundering money," he said simply. "Through HOA funds." The room felt cold. This wasn't just corruption, this was fraud. And criminal-level fraud at that. The whistleblower that evening. A knock rattled my door. It was Diane, the soft-spoken board secretary, always seen trailing behind Karen with a clipboard and cautious eyes. She looked pale, anxious, a woman balancing between fear and a breaking conscience. "Can I come in?" she asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Once inside, she dropped a flash drive into my hand like it was radioactive. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Karen's gone too far." "What's on here?" "Board meeting recordings, financial notes, a scanned memo about reducing transparency." I didn't know what she was planning at first, but when she started doctoring records for the loan application, her voice cracked. She made me sign off on payments that didn't exist. I stared at her. "Do you understand what this means?" She nodded, trembling. "I need a lawyer." "You're going to need more than that," I said. "But you're doing the right thing." That night, I backed up the drive in 5 locations, emailed it to Ravi, and sent a copy to a journalist friend who owed me a favor. Karen wanted to wage a quiet war of fines. We were about to respond with truth and volume. The Town Hall Rebellion. We organized a public meeting. No HOA branding, no agenda, just homeowners. We held it at the local library, where Karen couldn't gavel her way out or shut off microphones. We didn't have PowerPoints, we had people. One after another, residents shared stories. Emotional, raw, often tearful. A single mom fined $500 for painting her mailbox the wrong shade of navy. A veteran harassed for leaving his American flag out past sunset. A retiree threatened with lien action for missing a weed that grew 2 inches too high. When I stepped up, I didn't deliver a speech. I played a recording. Karen's voice, from the whistleblower's flash drive, "We'll keep the fine revenue off the books. Label it provisional compliance holding until the loan goes through." No one reads the footnotes. Gasps, murmurs, and then silence. The room transformed from frustration into resolve. The news storm by the next day. It was everywhere. Local outlets picked up the story first. HOA president accused of financial misconduct. Then regional news ran with it. Community revolts against rogue HOA board whistleblower, exposes falsified records. The journalist I'd tipped off did a full expose, complete with financial breakdowns, voice recordings, and homeowner testimonials. Her headline, "HOA or Mafia, How One Woman Weaponized Power in the Suburbs and Like Vultures to Fresh Meat." The real power players swooped in. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation. The bank reviewing the loan immediately froze the application. And Karen, she vanished. The disappearance for 3 days. No one saw her. Her luxury SUV sat parked crookedly in her driveway. No lights on at night. No trash cans moved. No mail collected. Then, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. Neighbors whispered. One said she saw Karen drive away at 3 a.m. with 2 suitcases. Another claimed her husband left town weeks ago. Diane, now openly helping us, confided that Karen had been quietly moving money into a separate bank account. She was trying to flee the sinking ship, but the ship wasn't hers to begin with. It belonged to all of us. Fallout and foundation at the emergency HOA board meeting, called per the bylaws with over 70% community signatures. We voted unanimously. Karen Matthews, removed board, disbanded emergency oversight committee, formed. We replaced the iron grip of one with the open hands of many. Diane gave a full statement to state investigators and was granted immunity for cooperation. Ravi and a few others volunteered for a financial review team. My neighbor Chloe, a middle school teacher, helped write a new resident bill of rights to protect against future abuse. A community that had once lived under threat of lawn violations was now rebuilding itself with fairness, integrity, and laughter. Karen had built her empire with paper, fear, and vanity. We burned it down with truth, unity, and a damn good spreadsheet. But just when we thought it was over, a letter arrived. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from a law firm in another county. Apparently, Karen had filed a lawsuit against the entire community for defamation, loss of reputation, and emotional damages. Is she serious? I muttered, scanning the letter. She's desperate, Ravi said, looking over my shoulder. And desperate people do stupid things. I exhaled. One more battle to fight. But this time, we weren't playing defense. We were ready to finish what she started. I always thought the final blow would be something loud, a courtroom gavel, a police raid, maybe even a front-page takedown. But when Karen Matthews returned, it wasn't with sirens or lawyers. It was with a smirk and a lawsuit filed against 76 residents. Total damages sought, $10 million. Allegations, character assassination, emotional distress, conspiracy to dismantle a community structure. I almost laughed until I read my name on page 3, alongside Dad's, and Ravi's, and Diane's. She was suing all of us. This wasn't just petty revenge. It was her final weapon, litigation as intimidation. But she didn't realize we were too far in to be scared. Standing our ground, the first HOA meeting under the new interim board was jam-packed. Folding chairs filled every corner of the community center. Laughter returned where tension used to live. And fear. It was gone. But the lawsuit was real. This is what she does, Diane told us, shaking her head. When she can't control the system, she tries to bury people in it. Dad had already connected with legal counsel. His bank offered assistance after the media storm exposed Karen's financial tampering, worried about reputational damage. The law firm reviewing the case called it frivolous, inflammatory, and laughably weak. Still, court is court. And in court, facts matter, but perception matters more. Courtroom chess. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was supposed to be a preliminary motion, just procedure. Karen turned up in a navy suit 2 sizes too large. The confident, polished queen of fines and fear looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Her new attorney was a man named Becker, slick hair, smug aura, and the kind of suit that screams. Billable hours start at $600. He tried to open strong. My client has endured coordinated harassment, unfounded accusations, and irreparable damage to her professional standing. The defendants conducted a witch hunt, but the judge raised one hand. Save it for trial, Mr. Becker. Right now we're addressing your motion for injunctive relief. Specifically, the demand that all community activity cease pending litigation. Becker blinked. Yes, Your Honor. Given the hostility, we're not freezing an entire neighborhood because your client is upset. She was removed from her volunteer board position. The judge replied flatly. Dad stood next. Our motion is to dismiss the case entirely, he said calmly, on grounds of bad faith, lack of evidence, and overwhelming community support to hold Karen Matthews accountable for misconduct. And then he dropped it. The folder. Inside, false vendor payments, faked meeting minutes, audio recordings, financial misappropriation logs, signed witness statements including one from Karen's own daughter. Diana, the judge, leafed through it slowly. I'll need time to review, she said, but I see enough here to question the foundation of this lawsuit. In the meantime, no actions will be taken against the defendants. Court is adjourned. Karen didn't speak. She just walked out. And somehow, that silence felt like our biggest win yet. Restitution. 2 weeks later, the court issued a ruling. Lawsuit dismissed. Karen Matthews was ordered to pay legal fees and issued a cease and desist from contacting any HOA members. That same week, we received a letter from the State Attorney General's office. Formal charges filed. Fraud, falsification of financial documents, abuse of authority. In a regulated community body, Karen Matthews had finally been held accountable not by revenge, but by the very system she'd tried to twist. Rebuilding with the chaos behind us, Pinecrest Gardens transformed, lawn fines eliminated, board meetings transparent, live-streamed, open floor for all residents, dues adjusted, with detailed breakdowns mailed monthly. We created a resident ethics charter written by a dozen homeowners from different walks of life. It guaranteed no one person could ever weaponize rules the way Karen did. And the community center. The renovation still happened, but not with shady loans. Instead, we crowdfunded it. Local businesses pitched in. Residents donated. Even Diane, who had once been Karen's silent ally, became the volunteer treasurer for the project. We built a new playground, planted trees, installed benches. We even dedicated a corner of the garden to Miss S. Wilson's bird feeders, the ones Karen once tried to ban. Closure one afternoon. Months later, I was walking past Karen's old house. It had been repainted, resold, and reclaimed by a family with twin toddlers who'd never heard the word violation notice. A welcome flag fluttered where a surveillance camera used to be. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing beside a moving truck. No makeup, no mask, just her. She didn't say anything, neither did I. But for the first time, she looked small, human, not a tyrant, not a villain, just a woman who had once believed power was protection. She stepped into the passenger seat, and the truck drove off. Just like that. No speech, no showdown, just a quiet exit. Legacy. At the next block party, we laughed about it. Kids ran wild between sprinklers. People parked wherever they wanted. Ravi grilled burgers with his Bluetooth speaker blasting 80s music. And Dad, he sat under the shade with Mom, watching the neighborhood he helped save come alive again. He turned to me, holding up his glass. To order, he said, but the kind we all agree on. Karen tried to control us with rules. We answered with unity. She buried us in paper. We responded with truth, transparency, and persistence. In the end, her legacy became a cautionary tale, and ours. A blueprint for something better. Not just a neighborhood, a community.